Welcome back. This is episode 4 of the US version of Utopia. I am Sterling. I have with me
Mark, here with you, talking about Utopia's episode 4 review.
Awesome. So we're probably going to overlay a visual in order to help out with this because it's a little confusing. Here's the idea of what's going on. We've been watching this an episode at a time of each one, watching them side by side. So US episode 1, UK episode 1. US episode 2, UK episode 2. We review those. Then we review 3. And then the question came up of how many episodes are actually in this show?
And we found out that the UK version has 6 episodes for season 1, and the US version has 8 episodes. So to combat this, we have decided to watch episode 4 on its own and let this catch up to the UK version.
So we've watched the other ones in line. This one is just going to be solo, one-off. We're just watching the US version, episode 4, talking about it. Next week, we'll probably watch US 5, UK 4. Following week, we'll probably do another one-off. Once again, we'll probably throw a visual up on screen so it makes a little bit more sense as far as how we're watching this. But the idea is by the end, the last 2 episodes, we'll be watching the second to last episode of the US and UK version, regardless of what number that is. And then the final episode of the podcast, we will watch the 2 final episodes, regardless of what their number is, so that it'll kind of line up a little bit better. Because we did notice that it did feel like the UK one was definitely pulling ahead.
And after watching this one, I feel like that is confirmed. The episode was basically pretty much everything that we saw in the last episode of the UK version. However, the only difference is there's a lot more padding, I would say. Just kind of padding things that don't really need to be put there. Wouldn't you agree?
Definitely. And I can't always tell whether or not it is... I do to some extent think that it is padding. I sometimes also think that they have these grandiose ideas of improving on the existing material. And so they'll oftentimes take something existing and flesh it out a little bit more and say, well, wouldn't it be really cool if we did this? And we kind of flesh this out a little bit more. And I get what they're trying to do. And honestly, oftentimes the idea for me really hits. Where I think about it and it's like, that could be really powerful. But generally the execution is worse.
I would
And
say...
so, even though they add some more to it, sometimes adding more doesn't always make it better. Or sometimes they just don't execute it well.
I agree. I think that, one of the big focuses on this episode was something that was very short in the UK episode. It was about the episode, like the part where Grant shot up a school. They didn't shoot up a school this time. They shot up a house. And we'll get to that, who they shot up. It is important, kind of. But how... something that was one scene that told so much, they had to put kind of all this back plot to, like, how did we get to this? Like, what is it that we got to this? And I feel like we did kind of learn a little bit more about Harvest and how it runs, and it's a lot different than the UK version. I think I like their version of the bad guys more, but in this version it is very like an organization, kind of seems very cultish, a little brainwashy. What do you think about what we saw in this episode?
I think that it's kind of like what you talked about, where they really did get some more information about Harvest. And so things are clearer. I do think that's another thing, is that I think that it sometimes feels like the US version is possibly not trusting the audiences and spoon feeding. So they want to be as clear as possible on every single part. But not all of the things that they did to make Harvest feel like a more fleshed out group really hit for me. In fact, I don't think I needed to know what kind of offices they were having their meeting in and the fact that they're excited about having bunt cake, which we're going to come back to me because I had some serious laughs about that. But
That
it,
whole
oh,
that whole
please.
that whole scene right there was interesting. You know, we see John Cusack's son. I think his name's Thomas, and I forget their last name. He like
Thomas
comes in,
Presti.
and it's just like for this like organization for what it is. Like they murder people. They're like savages. They go crazy and just like will kill people at the blink of an eye. Doesn't matter. But like all right, we're gonna have a whiteboard. This is our plan. And he's like what he stated was everything that was obvious. We gotta find Grant. We gotta find Jessica Hyde. Profit. Like we already know this. Like we're already trying to do this, and we're trying to figure out what to do. And then first off, it's also kind of weird that she was just sitting on one side and three guys were sitting on the other side. And we are introduced to this new character, Clara. Kara. Unfortunately, it does not matter for Kara because in setting up this whole operation of, they've all been ruthless. You know, we I think, get a little bit more of I think the motive that the U.S. version's Harvest is going for versus the UK version. They're going for very much like they're trying to kill all these people to save the environment. Like it's the Thanos thing, you know, like we're trying to kill half the population so that we can save the resources. And it seems like they're all kind of on board, like they're trying to save the world. And then they were like, oh, we're going to do a park shooting because we got to get Grant. And then this girl was like, hey, you know, I don't know if I'm down for this. This seems a little sketchy. Like, my kids play in that park. Like, you know, we can't just shoot innocent families at a park. Which ends up to be her downfall. And then we end up...
The weird thing for me was they even pointed out that the plan with the virus was her idea.
Right.
So she already came up with a super murdery plan, but then she draws a line. She said, like, there is a line.
Not my family.
So somehow he even offered a different park.
That's true.
It didn't have to be her family.
So she just didn't want mothers and families.
She comes up with some murdery plan that involves murdering a lot of children. It was the same thing. It was children. And it was actually, I think it seemed like it was going to be more children because it was a number of schools. And then all of a sudden you have, and I'm not trying to downplay this because this sounds like I'm trying to downplay murdering children, and I'm not. But then there's a much scaled down, you know, like, we'll do a thing in a park, and it's just the people that are there. It's not multiple parks. That's it. And she's, no, I've got a line here. Right. I didn't get it.
The other thing about that, where they were setting up that situation that was going to happen, where they were going to have them, you know, the kids shoot, and they were basically pulling from their kids, like some like weird school they have. I guess we kind of know where John Cusack gets his kids from. It's like he kind of adopts them out of this weird school, some probably cultish private school, and they pull the kid out, and it kind of like psychs it up like they're gonna have this kid do this thing, and then they didn't even do that. Like, it was like, oh, this kid, he's gonna do it, and he just had to put a gun there in the house. That was it. I thought that was a little I feel like that scene was not as powerful as the UK version. Like, the UK version just gave this other side of Arby that just made him savage. Same thing happened. He sees the kid with the raisins, and it just doesn't seem impactful. He didn't even seem to hesitate that long and didn't even, like, really care. It didn't seem to work.
For me, there was so much. He's shown so little emotion that you assume that a lot of things have got to be repressed. So it made sense to me when he's facing one way, and so you can't see half of his face. He does the action, and then he wipes his eye, the one you can't see.
Yeah.
You don't see the tear, but you know it's there. That, to me, was so much more powerful than the delay and then the scream.
And so, like we were saying earlier, Arby came in and he decided to shoot the girl that brought this disease, Kara, introduced in this episode. She seems like she's going to be this inside against John Cusack's character, and lo and behold, nope. She is now killed by fake Grant. And I think they kind of made it worse. It was a lot more kids, I feel like, than the other one. Just a lot more, like a whole family, and just like blap, 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 blap. Which is kind of interesting because, like, John Cusack, when he was talking to her earlier, was kind of like listening to her, like, oh, how was Thomas? He can be kind of got a fire under him, and clearly he's on Thomas' side, which I kind of figured, but he did seem like she did have a powerful voice to him, and I guess just like Jessica Hyde, having that powerful voice, blap, 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 can't have that in this show.
You just can't have that. And then, so then it just wasted time. Why did he take the time to have this really nice conversation with her when he knows what's going to happen to her? Why do we as an audience, I mean, I know why as an audience we had to watch that. It's so that they could make it a surprise when it happens. But it was just kind of trying to send us this wrong direction, and for me it didn't even necessarily land.
Well, yeah, I think that what they were trying to show was that the biggest problem for me is that they had this whole plot with this girl who had the idea to, like, do this infection kind of thing, even though there's been a bunch of viruses before. Did she have the idea for all the viruses or what? But she, had this idea. She could have this whole plot thing, but, like, they introduce her in the episode and they kill her in the episode. So, like, her whole story didn't matter. Her whole story was just padding for the show, which is one of the bigger problems and why we have to do 8 episodes instead of 6 episodes. Circle back. All right back from.
Absolutely. I felt like the same thing with the scene with Jessica Hyde and Grant, as she's trying to get the manuscript, she's trying to get the rest of the pages, whatever. It was such a bigger thing. That's pretty similar to other issues I've seen where it seems like they're trying to add more and getting less out of it. So with Grant and Jessica Hyde, I feel like it was a beautiful scene in the UK version. She started out very soft.
Mm-hmm. And angelic.
And she convinced him just with her words. And she brings him to a place, and it seems like it's a safe situation. And she's making questionable choices, giving a kid alcohol, but it kind of end-of-the-worldy type stuff. There's crazy stuff going on. It doesn't seem that crazy. And then the darkness comes out. That gets interrupted because he has to puke. And then this motherly side comes in. And you see this kind of real affection and warmth kind of come out. versus with the US version, it starts off manic, like a lot of the other US stuff does. So manic, where she does try and lull him in by saying, "Oh, look, I have that same thing. You want to get close enough to look at this? Now let me try and snatch this. Now let me try and take this from you by force, and let me chase you down, scare the shit out of you. No surprise you're running away, trying to break down doors." It was crazy. It did finally culminate in her actually, I think for the first time, getting somebody to do something she wanted without doing it by force. So to some extent, it did feel like character development.
Yeah, but
But it didn't
I
have a great arc. And it
right.
didn't feel great.
It doesn't feel earnest. That's the problem for me. Like, I've never once seen this character show anything like this, of any empathy, any like calm communication, any like pleasantries with anyone. I haven't seen her do that. Where the other Jessica Hyde, she was so manipulative. Like, is this girl doing a manipulative thing? You know, is this Jessica Hyde in the U.S. version manipulating the scene? Like, I just don't know, and I don't feel like she's good. Like, it doesn't seem to hit, and especially the way just before when they're like literally scrambling in the lawn grabbing pieces of Utopia, and after the way that she like attacked him, you're gonna tell me Grant, the most like wary kid in general, just gets attacked by Jessica Hyde, and then she just says a few words and he's like, yeah, you're right, Jessica, we gotta solve this together like Scooby-Doo and the gang. That's, I just, that for me doesn't make sense in Grant's character, because he is this like kind of not scumbaggy, but kind of like resilient. He's a very resilient kid, and you know, you're gonna tell me that he basically, first meeting him, this girl, she tricks him, she grabs him, he jumps out a window, she's scraping up parts, they're staring down at each other like this, and she's just like, no, Grant, we're gonna solve this together. You're a special kid, Grant. I don't know why, I haven't seen you do anything, but you're a special kid. And now all of a sudden, and that's another thing where her words were coming from. She kind of came out of a whole different field. She was just like, oh, Grant, like, you and I can solve this together. Like, you're so smart, Grant. You're like, you don't know anything about Grant. Why would you? Oh, you trick people into thinking you're 40 years old?
Yeah, it just doesn't, like a lot of other things, they try to make it better, and they try to make it longer so it takes up more screen time, and it just doesn't hit. So for me, it's longer and less effective.
And what's interesting is, so we had like, if you look at like Grant and Jessica Hyde's interaction, like they kind of did that same bathroom scene thing, but two different things were happening. One, they were hiding in the bathroom together, afraid of Arby, and you know, she stuck, you know, they take pieces out, they put it in, send him out, and it was that like that same looking bathroom with the same opening in the window that he went out. And this time Jessica Hyde was all crazy at him, like, so it seemed like they were combining that scene. I don't know if we're gonna get an Arby killing young Alice's foster parent or mom or whatever, you know, down the road, but it seems like they kind of took that scene from the UK version and jammed it into this US version.
But different and not as good.
But not as good. That's the problem. It's never as good as the UK version. Unfortunately. Also, we want to talk about some interesting, weird things that don't need to be in there. The bunt cake one was a joke, which was funny, but you were going to talk about that. But first, before we get back to that, there's one weird scene where John Cusack is stretching his son, and they're talking about nothing. And it's just, I was just so weird. I was like, why is this scene in here? This doesn't need to be in here. He's just like stretching him. He's like, yeah, we gotta go find those kids. Yeah, you ready? Yeah, we gotta do that. Like, what? It was just such a weird scene. But go for the bun cakes, because I wanted to hear about that.
So going back to the scene that you're talking about, it it feels like they are once again trying to do the stylistic thing that the UK version had some real style to it. They're still doing lens flare in this, even though it doesn't. I
I
don't know
didn't see
why.
it.
They're it was very small this time, very small this time. So they're trying to do this whole style thing, and I feel like in order to do that, you have to you have to find your own and you have to lean into it. You can't be kind of mousy about it like I'm trying to do this kind of stylistic thing, but I hope you guys like me. It kind of has to be a this is who I am, this is what I'm doing. Like me or don't. I've made my decision. And so I feel like they dip their toes in, but they don't commit to it. There's not enough of that style, so it just doesn't. I don't know if you ever watched the Umbrella Academy.
I watched the first season and half of the second season. I don't know why I didn't finish it, but yeah. Seen
Okay,
parts of
so it kind of feels like season one versus season two, where season one they were unsure of themselves. They didn't know who they were. They knew they were doing some weird stuff that I assume is from the comics, and they didn't know how people would feel about it. And it didn't feel like they committed to it, and it didn't feel like it hit. And then the second season, when they found themselves, they went for it, and they got weird, and it was great. If you're gonna be weird, you've got to commit to it. Or if you want to be stylish, you have to commit to it. To do this thing where half the time you're a normal show filming normally, and then sometimes you try and do a stylistic scene, it doesn't gel. It doesn't feel like you know who you are. And for me, it doesn't quite hit.
You're exactly right. And I feel like in that sense of style of it trying to also be its own thing but also do different style, it really fails in that. And one particular scene I think about is it took a while to get there, but they blow up things in season or in the UK episode 2 or 3, I want to say, one of the earlier episodes. Jessica Hyde blows up the van that they were in, and it's a zoomed out shot. There's this like blue ocean, and she's like walking. It blows up behind her. She doesn't even flinch, and it was a beautiful shot. And we're going. This one, we set up this whole scene, like, and for the one in the UK version, we just cut to that scene. We see it, and we cut. She says, "Can't use that car anymore. They already know that car. We can't use that anymore." This one, we have to have a whole scene of them breaking everything in the house. Oh, this one guy, he can't break the chair. He's so weak. Ian, man, he's the guy I relate to. My hero. Can't even break a chair. But the same scene, we have this funny joke. She walks out of the house, and it's like the explosion's next to her. It looks not really there. She just walks out, and it's like it's trying to be like, oh, look, remember, she walks away from explosions and doesn't look back at them. But it's just not, it's not as done well. And I know people that are fans of the US are going to be mad at us for saying that. And you know what? Come fight me. Come at me, bro.
Bunt cakes.
Bunt cakes.
Thomas Christie. So we're going into the secret meeting. They have an entire wing of this huge building that is has plastic wrap that's saying that it's under construction. There's big stuff coming. He looks around to make sure nobody sees it. He goes through. Then there's this whole red light portion where apparently when you're doing construction, you want red lights. I don't know. It doesn't make sense.
For the
Whatever.
parking.
he goes through the red lights, and they're in an office at this point. And as you pointed out, they've got like the whiteboard. It's kind of corny for this death group to be whiteboarding solutions to problems where we already know the problems we need to deal with. He doesn't need to be explaining them. But I think they just want to make it super clear, right? Like they have to play down to the lowest denominator. They don't trust their audience. So they're like, let's
Americans.
make this clear who's good, who's bad, and let's put it on a whiteboard.
Yeah.
So you can connect all the dots.
Which is wild. It's just a wild thing to like. It's hard to take it seriously. That's the problem. It's like we see this one where okay. Let's compare what we've seen of the.
Okay. What? One moment. I have to get to this button.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I'm just trying to set the scene.
Oh, okay. God, sorry.
I'm just trying to set the scene.
Sorry.
He was unusually excited about bundt cake. Like, I don't remember what he said, but it was he was really excited about bundt cake. And we see it's on a cake tray. So it's an entire bundt cake on a cake tray. Plates aren't out. They're waiting for him so that they can start the meeting, and then they'll start nomming. He walks in, he says his whole thing about bundt cake. He walks over to the to the board to start writing down the different points. And the moment that they've cut to the table of him explaining the points, bundt cake is gone. Crumbs, plates are out, which means that these fatties, as soon as he turned his back to the board, they were just like,
oh my god, I didn't even notice that. The poor guy didn't even get a piece of bundt cake.
You know, piece of bundt cake. And then by the time it's like 15 seconds that it's off of the bundt cake. And by the time it goes back, like they've all like sat back up and, you know, not moving.
No crumbs on them, just crumbs on the
crumbs on the plate. Empty bundt cake thing. Just
I can't. Oh man.
Whose job is it to deal with continuity? You know, it's to actually put a line in there about the bundt cake and then not think that anybody would be looking at it.
Which probably, like, when they were filming it, they probably had the bundt cake scene filmed. They're probably filming a couple of these scenes in this little dinky room. They got the bundt scene filled, and then they were like, well, you guys can eat the bundt cake, you know, like, between shots and stuff. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, we're gonna eat this bundt cake. And, you know, they're, like, filming the rest of it. Bundt cake's just gone. They just ate it. They ate it, like, 10 takes ago. Just, well, we were hungry, you know? We're not gonna let the bundt cake go to waste. We paid good money for that.
Or it might be one of those situations where they're used to, you know, when you have food on set, you oftentimes have to like re-top it off, right, so that it looks the same. And maybe they were expecting that, and there just wasn't budget for it, so there was just the one bundt cake. And so after everybody, you know, ate a bunch of it, thinking like, oh, I mean, there's going to be more for the next take, and then they're like, no. We don't have more bundt cake.
We can only afford one. Only one.
We're gonna leave in the comment. But anyways.
We're Amazon Prime. We just spent all our money on the Rings of Power. We can't afford multiple bundt cakes for Utopia. Sorry, we're already giving you 8 episodes. My mistake.
Oh, Rings of Power. Don't get me down that rabbit hole.
Oh, we don't have time for that. We don't have time for that.
I don't know if you remember where you were going. If not, I can...
Take us.
Okay. So the next thing, the show is very jokey.
Very jokey.
How do you feel about that?
Kind of like I said earlier, like, you know, there was the part there was the weird stretching scene, which I feel like was kind of trying to, like, be a joke a little bit. There's, like, the, you know, the Wilson thing when he had the, like, tiger eye patch in the last episode for a second, and then, you know, the next scene they flipped it around. And the one where Ian couldn't break the cherries, you know. I think it's a show that is trying really hard to like make like Marvel cinematic jokes, like a little wink and a nod at what's going on, like hey, what's going on, you know. But I don't think, like, if you look at the UK version, it feels like a thriller. Like, this is a very like shit, what's gonna happen. Like, we heard the threat, you know, like we see this corporation that's in this, you know, little bunker type thing, and they're drawn on their whiteboard, and they're, you know, how do we solve our problem? And you look at this organization at the other one, and the guy that just like went and got a sample, you know, he's like, we're gonna rape your wife. Like, we are going to brutalize your wife. We're gonna kill you. We are gonna do all these things to you. And this one is like, bun cakes and whiteboards. How are we gonna solve this problem? We're a secret organization that even the CIA wants to get. Speaking of, they had the Milner character.
They did, and they had to introduce a joke in there as well. So let's hit a joke that we hit right before that. So they're in the car, and
oh my god, I have this written down. I know exactly what you're saying.
Say it.
Let me see if I'm right. When Wilson walks out and he says, "I've limited to one torture a month or a week, one a month or one a week."
One a month.
I just want to show you
It.
torture. Once a week, once a month, right here.
Is it a joke to him?
Right. This guy just literally had his eyeball scooped out, and he's just like, I'm gonna make a joke. I've had enough torture this time.
And I get what he's doing.
Just try to, you know, focus up a little bit.
High five.
High five. I'll be a little blurry for now. I'll get it in focus. Go ahead.
I get it. I get what they're doing. You know, that's got to be a shit situation to go, but make it seem realistic. Like, make the jokes seem realistic. That is not a time where I feel like he'd be joking. I think he would get out of the car. If she's saying something about torture, he doesn't want to. He's lived it. He knows how bad it is. He doesn't want to do it again. I could see him just saying, I'm sorry, I can't.
Or been there, done that.
Yeah.
That's an even jokier way to say it. Been there, done that. Don't want to do it again. But, like, I'm limiting it down to once a month. That was a joke that I feel like did not land. It did not land at all.
And then they get in, so you can do your whole Milner thing in just one moment, but I just want to set it up. Because we're getting into something serious. We're meeting somebody who, is she good? Is she bad? I don't know who she is. It's a creepy situation. It's an abandoned Toys R Us being held open by a creepy doll that's, you know, its head is in the doorway. They get in there, and there's a step stool, and the two of them have this awkward moment of trying to sit on it. And it's this joke about how it's not really sized for two people. But they're gonna
let me turn it diagonal.
Anyway, and it's, what am I watching?
Yeah.
And then it's leading up to what you're about to say. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and just with everything with, like, you know, like, the reason they contacted Milner the first time, Jessica Hyde was not with them. Like, they had nowhere else to go. They were like, shit, like, what do we do? And they were like, we'll call this number that we have, you know, maybe she'll tell us something. And that kind of, like, gets that ball rolling. But in this one, it was like Jessica Hyde's there, but, like, she's not there. Like, they're all together, all trying to, like, they're not breaking up the characters as much. They're all Scooby-Dooing it together. They're all using Utopia, like, oh, numbers, boom, 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 it's on this clock. What is that phone number? Oh, the numbers that were on her nails, and there are the numbers on this clock. We found it. We're, like, they're using Utopia more as, like a MacGuffin, like, oh, this is gonna help me get to the next thing, you know, like, instead of like Utopia being like we're trying to get to Utopia, they're doing this like we are using Utopia to like get to the next thing that we need to do. Like why would they put that number in there? You know, like to call Milner, we're putting the number in there to call Milner, so the dad knew that number. But like if you remember, this organization started after September 11th, and they're just kind of like nobody knows who they are. They somehow can pull a lot of strings out of nowhere. Where like the other one was like, oh, this is an organization that had no restrictions, and they just took power. They just said, I'm gonna take this power. This is mine. Where this one's like, no, we don't like this. We took power. And I honestly though, I do think this is a pretty good plan by them, putting it like making it look like it is the meat's fault, to then when they come at him and test it and see that it's not at fault, then they're kind of like, well, we can't blame him twice. Like, well, I mean you could, but he, you know, like you would want to be very careful for pointing another finger at him after being wrong the first time, I think.
Right.
And they did set it up where it's like in all these schools where all these kids are getting infected, which is funny. Should we start talking about the hero of the story?
Yeah. Was it the end credits?
What? The end credits? Well, I meant Dwight Schrute.
Was it when the episode was done?
No. I have one more thing about Dwight Schrute I want to talk about.
Oh, I thought you were saying the hero was
the end credits. No.
Who they want to be the hero.
Who they want to be a hero, but
yeah, just, I'm with you. I'm with you.
So first there was the weird like diner scene where he like rallies with the like group of kids, and I just felt like that was a weird scene that didn't need to be there. Like the parents of the kids that are back there, like, oh, which I also have a continuity error when they finally get. Yeah. Wait for this. So, let's talk about when Dwight Schrute, the hero of the story, is at the barricade, and he's like trying to get in. He's making signs, you know, and he's chumming it up with this one.
Making signs badly. Did you see that he didn't even fit the word on one?
Yeah.
Very hard to read.
It's like crushed in there, like just
manned, deep manned, like bad.
So then he's just sitting here with this guy, right? He's just chumming around, just chumming with this guy, just a random fucking Joe Schmo over here. And he's like, can't get into this fucking place. And finally they're like, yes, that guy that can maybe solve this problem, come in here now, come talk to us. How, you know, whatever. And they're like, he turns around and he's like, not without my partner. He comes everywhere with me. Like, just like, one, you're risking not being able to let in because of this fucking guy. Two, you're risking this guy getting infected. Three, what if you bring this guy in and he freaks out with his daughter, like if she's like dead? Like, four, like, this just seems really like a dumb thing. And then the first tent, we see his daughter.
Also, the private can't okay that.
Yeah,
She's
right?
the one who brought the message of like, hey, the bigwigs gave me the order to get you. I'm at the bottom of the totem pole. I run around and do stuff like this. Get people, get coffee. My job is to do stuff like that. I'm supposed to get you. And then he's like, I'm not going without this person. And she's like, I can okay that.
Yeah.
I only have one of these badges to allow somebody in, but I think one, I can okay that, and two, people are going to trust me when I'm like, this other guy's coming in without a badge. Me, the private, is saying so.
Let me tell you, pal. Let me tell you, buddy.
So the first tent.
First tent, we find his daughter right away. Perfect. Easy. Like, we also wandered off from the people escorting us on the space, but we get right to where his daughter is, and she looks so sick. but she doesn't have the rash on her face. This is the T-rash virus, where there's a giant fucking T on your face. Well, we don't have it in the budget to put makeup on this little girl to make a T-rash for the continuity of this T-rash virus that we used Utopia to solve the whatever thing. Why didn't she have a T-rash?
I don't know. She was covered in petroleum jelly. Somebody been... I don't know if that's what saved her. She was...
Maybe that's what cares the T-rash. Now, also, to go back to your theories that you had, two of your theories I have comments on.
Why don't we start with some new ones and then come back to comments? Let's go ahead.
Just comments. There was a comment where he was talking to his wife, the hero Dwight Schrute. He's talking to his wife, and she says, "Is that good for your anxiety?" And I was wondering if that was the crazy thing that they were alluding at in the first one. I don't know, but it was just something I saw where she said, "Is that good for your anxiety? Like, you should just come home. Is it good for your anxiety?" So I don't know. The other thing with the Mr. Rabbit. So I had a quick little theory about Mr. Rabbit in the UK version, where I thought that Jessica's dad, because your original theory, correct me if I'm wrong, is Mr. Rabbit is Jessica Hyde's dad.
That was the original theory.
So in the UK version, I have a theory. I do think that your version could be right in the US version. In the UK version, I think that it was... I have a little inkling that the guy that Becky was talking to was Jessica Hyde's dad.
Okay.
And he's trying to get the Utopia manuscript back. So that's what I think for the UK version. However, when she talks about the cookies, I think that it is her dad and she misremembers, and it is Mr. Rabbit.
So, unless the whole Mr. Rabbit's identity, which, by the way, they're saying Mr. Rabbit's identity is in Utopia, which is why he doesn't want it out. So, if that is true, it wouldn't make sense for the person who created it to be outing himself.
Right.
So I mean, it's possible that's true, and maybe this whole thing of like his identity is in there and he doesn't want it out is not true, or maybe he didn't mean to have it published. So I don't feel as strongly about that theory.
Also, just saying, if John Cusack is Mr. Rabbit, rabbits proliferate. He has a lot of kids under him, and Jessica Hyde looks like she could have been like a foster kid in this thing where it could have been just a kid in this group, and she saw him as her dad, and he talked about Mr. Rabbit, and Grant could have came from the same place originally.
Grant or Arby, or both?
Well, both. I know Arby was in the program.
Okay, get ready to take up the screen, because
I'm ready.
Unfortunately, I think you're taking some of the wind out of my sails.
Oh, sorry.
No, I love the fact that you've jumped on it.
Oh, not
This
me.
is a still. This is a still from the comic. And we see Jessica Hyde on the bottom right-hand side. She is holding a rabbit, interestingly enough.
Interesting.
There's this weird twins in the front who seem to be sharing one braid, who later we see them using their braids as jump rope for Jessica Rabbit. And everybody here has these plain kind of, not quite Amish, but like very plain type clothing.
Yes.
And
Also,
so now let's look at one other picture.
show me. Yes. Oh man.
Look
you.
at the very plain clothing. And some of them, although in the image in the comic, it's definitely the women who have like the undershirt and then the kind of brown suspendery thing. Some of the guys have the brown thing. Some of the
Yeah.
girls have it here, but it's all that same kind of plain clothing in what looks like a classroom-ish setting where you might have kids doing jump rope and things like that.
Yeah.
I definitely think Jessica Hyde came from the school. I definitely think Arby came from this school.
Well, yeah, and especially from the UK version, we saw that interaction with Arby and Jessica Hyde that alluded that they kind of like were cut from the same cloth. You know, like we know what we went through together. Like,
Maybe they were in the same class or they.
you know, maybe like so the one thing about watching this fourth episode, we might I'm curious if we find out in the UK one version later that there's a whole school about them. But I do feel like Jessica Hyde went there. I feel like Grant could have been there early on, like one of the like little baby ones. Because like also if you looked at Kara, she had a bunch of kids like part of that group. It looks like they were just like adopting people that weren't wanted. So like Grant could have been one of those kids at a young age and he just escaped because they didn't. Well, no. I'm now rescinding. I don't think Grant was part of it because Arby says we don't know who he is. Because that's why they needed to get, or no, not Arby. Or it might have been Arby because Thomas, when they were in that group meeting, they were saying the reason they were doing this was to get someone to come forward to like say who he was. So never,
Right.
maybe they aren't brother and sister. Maybe they are eventually. We'll find out. But I didn't mean to even take the wind out of your sails. This was all just like in as we were going. It was just coming to me. I'm like, oh wait a minute, and it was snowballing and going down. I didn't even think about that. So sorry to take the wind out of your sails on that.
That's really so. I mean, mine took. So I was cheating, and when it got to them looking at the different panels, I was pausing it and picking it apart, panel by panel, and then later they had the school scene, and it was like, oh, I was looking very closely at that panel. I remember this quite well.
Right.
And this was just kind of a passing scene. I still feel how I feel about the comic before, which is that it still doesn't feel like it has substance. There's not enough dialogue to carry from one thing to another. And if anything, I would say that this it just feels like Easter eggs. If you look at it really closely, there's really interesting stuff hidden under there that can give you interesting information about what's coming ahead, but there's no substance. It doesn't feel like a real comic. There's actually really interesting stuff in it. I don't know if you noticed it. It seems like there are parts of it that are cut out and pasted over top of other parts.
Yeah, I saw that. I noticed that.
So is there stuff hidden underneath? Is it unfinished and then that was added? Is it hiding something? Is there meaning to what's pasted over top? It is very interesting to look at. Like it definitely feels very much like a puzzle,
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel like a comic that somebody could read and have any clue what's going on because there's the yellow house. I think that's the house. When they're playing jump rope in the back distance, there's
Oh
the
yeah,
one
yeah.
she lived in a house by herself. That's the house. We're seeing the classroom that she was in. We see an action scene with Artemis, but there's nothing that it doesn't feel at all connected. It doesn't feel like any of this is tied together and is a real comic that has any real substance that anybody would want to read because
Right.
it would make any sense.
Right.
So no substance. It's kind of like the show. It just doesn't.
Yes.
It's got the surface level stuff. It's got the looks, but it doesn't have substance to back it up.
It does not, and it doesn't create that suspense that I think that the UK version captures so well. The oh man, like this is a high stakes thing, like we are on the verge of death, and the US version, it feels, like how many times in the UK version do we already have to like change houses because we got to go. We meet in the library and we found another guy who tried to kill us and we have to kill him, or not the library, the church. We still don't even know anything about Utopia in the UK version. We don't know, like we've seen maybe like a glimpse or two, but like the other one is it's all the jokes. It's we're gonna Scooby Doo this. It feels like that Utopia is for like an American audience, like just big old dummies, just us over here, just big dummies that love American media. I mean, I really don't know what they were thinking, because it's like it's trying so hard to like do its own thing but also be the same thing, and it's not succeeding at any of it. And it's, I do think that maybe John Cusack's character is a little interesting, because John Cusack's a great actor, and I thought it was funny when he's talking to Arby and he's like, do it humane. And he's like, you do know what humane is, right? And he's like, quick and painless. He's like, yeah, that's a good enough definition as anybody could get, like, I was like, okay, John Cusack, you're funny, you're good. But like, just all of it is, like we've seen less of the bad guys in the UK version, but they seem way fucking scarier than the other one.
I think by taking some of the mystery out of this one, it's very much less scary. When you see that the evil organization is whiteboarding it over bundt cake.
The crumbs of bundt cake.
It's hard to take it seriously. It doesn't have the same gravitas at that point. I do agree with you about John Cusack's character. He definitely is interesting. He has that level of softness and affection, and you can see from his connection to this terrible stuff that he's a terrible person, but you can't see that in how he does anything. I don't know if he truly believes that he is good and that what he is doing is for a good purpose, so in the end it all pays off. And so he doesn't have to pay it off as like, oh, I have these evil tendencies, because maybe he really does believe he's good.
Yeah, I mean, you think
interesting way to play it.
I do think that all of the the Harvest people think they're doing the right thing, because when they're sitting at that table, we heard them say, "What did you do in the world today? Like what did like I forget how it goes
or something." Yeah.
In this crowd, how did you earn your place in this crowded world today? Like, what did you do to earn your place in this crowded world? And they were all like on key, like, we're all in this cult together, and I think he seems like a very good cult leader. Like, he's just like, he's Thanos, but he's got a whole cult behind him. Right. And we're seeing the cult side of things.
Definitely. So, I'm interested in seeing where this goes for the next episode, and if everybody else is as interested, then stay tuned for the next podcast, because the next one we're back to US UK side by side. We'll watch another standalone after that. Final 2 episodes we'll watch side by side. We'll unpack it for you.
Yep. So thank you for coming. If you could, hit that like and subscribe button. Hit that bell for notifications. We're Mark and Sterling, and we'll see you next time on this podcast.
This podcast.
Thanks, guys.